we've really got to get everyone off these 30-year-old boards.
2001, is it really? Oh, it was redesigned for 2001 with new smoother, and that'd be the newer one with new smoother entry, tip, and tail profiles. These ain't smooth entry, tip, and tail profiles.
Judging by the base, 1997?
Yeah, I'd say.
Let us know in the comments if anybody knows for sure. All right, guys, today we got another vlog. Last week I had an interesting one with a customer where he had, I think he had one of these, but the ASIM version. So we're talking 92. And he was coming in to get his second freaking snowboard, which is nuts. But it's not hard to explain the advantages to riding a new board, but I also thought we should just talk about that, because even in the last 10 years, there's been so many advancements. I really want to talk about core profiling. That's probably one of the biggest things that's happened. But yeah, going from this, 10-year jumps were massive. Okay, so that's going to be today's vlog. The biggest thing in my eyes, especially when we go back 30 years to 92, say, is going to be core profiling. The way a board is going to flex underfoot from these planks, which were just one, that doesn't change thickness barely until we get right to the end of the tip and tail. The newer boards, there's a lot of flexation in between here. They're malleable underfoot, so they ride a lot easier, right, Fozzie? Like
100%.
That's one of the biggest things going from 30 years. No one should be riding these anymore. We're starting a museum, by the way. The Tribute Lounge will have a small museum downstairs. That's where a lot of these boards should be, unless you're doing a vintage club thing on the weekend, which is, that shit's super fun. And I love seeing people ride these. There's plate adapters now to ride newer bindings. That's a whole other episode in itself. These should be on the wall. We shouldn't see anybody riding those. We go back 10, 15 years. We had our friend Bruce donated this for our museum. This is a very unique board, and Fozzie's done a bit more research on it than I had, but there's a cool Canadian connection to this, and we talk a lot about canting plates and things like that. Well, this was designed right into the board. Now, the profile of this board is actually really nice too. You can tell that this is within the wheelhouse of boards that you absolutely could still go shred on, no question. Obviously, insert pattern is current, and there is some core profiling there. You see it right in the waist. It thins out in the waist. But, Fozzie, what else let's just talk about this really quick, because it is damn cool. What else did you learn about canting?
It was a brainchild of Lofo. He was in collaboration with Tom Sims since the 80s even. He developed the foldable high back. So we have high backs that collapse and fold because of Lofo. He owned and operated Surf Politique, which was this big factory in Quebec during the years when the Canadian dollar was weak. So tons of people were getting their boards built there. Once the dollar went to parity, it kind of faded away, but he kept in contact with Tom. He and Tom collaborated a lot on this board starting around 2009. Tom was riding prototypes of this into through 2011 and 2012, and then they had a phone call on September 9th, 2012. They had a phone call about colors and the final flex. They were basically just putting the finishing touches on what would become this production board. And Tom passed away 2 days later.
Oh, crazy.
Which was crazy. But Tom never actually saw or held onto a production version of this. But this did go out, and essentially, unless you're riding a stance that is hip width. So if you're at a incredibly narrow stance in the 12 to 15 inches past hip width, your legs are actually coming in. You're creating a bit of a triangle. And if you have a triangle and then you're riding on flat, you have a pretty vicious angle at your ankle, and you lose a lot of power that way. And it's not great for your ankles. So most of us in the 22-inch stance range, or 21 and a half to 24. And this would accommodate all of that. It's going to give you back that 90-degree angle between your ankle and then how your leg is coming up into your torso. It really helps you apply pressure better, especially fore and aft, gives you more fore and aft stability. It is accomplished nowadays mostly in the bindings. So most of the binding manufacturers will have this is apparently, I think it's 3 degrees.
Yeah, it's
And
pretty aggressive.
It's pretty aggressive.
Actually. You can see.
It's pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
And maybe even more than 3. Yeah. So now they accommodate it just in the EVA foam of the binding pads themselves. And then some of the boot companies even sneak an extra degree in on the footbeds.
Yeah, exactly. So not like we're trying to sell this, because it was a pretty limited production. I think it was 2 years.
Yeah, they only did it for about 2 years.
Yeah. So, but this is A, it's just super cool. We wanted to show you guys. B, I don't think we should be riding snowboards going further back than, say, 2012, 2013 anyway, because
so that core profiling it's actually like the secret. If you look at a lot of the profiles, the silhouette of a lot of boards, there's boards from like 1988 Skull Skates one I saw that was loved it. The silhouette, the core profile, the thinness of a board, that's been like the secret art of a snowboard forever.
So think about the torsion of a board, right? If they're not planing anything out of it, and it's that thick between your feet, for you to torsionally move that board.
So we call that pedaling, like the differential between front and back. And you want to start a real mean heel turn, you could push on that front heel. You can actually almost push down on your back toes, or think of that. And you can really get the front half of the board to engage, and then the back half comes in after. That's totally not possible until we've had boards that are profiled properly, which get thinner in the middle. Burton, of course, has squeeze box, so it's thin, and then it gets quite a bit thicker, then it gets thin again under the bindings, then thicker, then thin, and so on.
Yeah.
All
and
the way
everybody
through.
has their own verbiage for what they're doing. Jones has a different terminology. So everyone has a version of it. You can really see it on certain kids' boards, because the lighter weight somebody is, the more they're profiling these cores out
thin
too.
in between the feet.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, of course, is camber. And we look back at this old Burton, the camber lines. There's so much camber. It used to be the thought that, and it kind of worked, that all that camber is what gave you the snap out, and it does. However, too much camber, and you really start shouldering all the load and forces of the board on the two, what we call contact points. Starting to almost get away from talking about contact points. If you build a board correctly, you should feel the pressure along the entire edge, not just at either end. So all this camber even further accentuated, and these ends are stiff as hell compared to new boards,
us at 12, 13 years old, when I was riding one of these,
so
a 6'1", when I was 120 pounds, it was, you could never, like Fozzie was saying, like the pedaling out of a turn or being able to power, it just didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
I forgot to mention too, and I should bring this up, binding technology is also allowing us to tweak the boards, right? Because the way the base plates are now designed, if you look at an Ultra, you're standing mostly on foam. So that is also giving you our EST from Burton. Yeah. Things like that are also allowing us to do so.
Way more natural.
Think about it when you're riding. Some people just don't. You're riding with your upper body and your hips, and you're not thinking about how you can manipulate the snowboard, especially at the waist.
It's one of the first things I do when I go ride with, like, if I ever do a session with like really advanced riders, I'm like, when's the last time you worked on snowboarding with just your feet?
Yeah.
Just your feet. Yeah. Anyway, so the camber, of course, now we have like really longer blends. We'll still have camber up to 9 mils or so in the middle. But back in the day, you could find boards with almost 2 centimeters of camber, which was insane, and stiff as hell in the middle because it was so planky. And a lot of these updates and like figuring out this core, newer style core profiling took a long time and didn't really come into play until the teens, the 2000s,
exactly,
really.
Yeah.
Same thing with the early rises and the different camber lines, even the wood cores, trying to find that proper formula, like of what wood to use where. There's very few wood cores that it's just the same wood, broadly across. They will mix softer woods with harder woods in different areas and for the inserts as well.
So that's why you see certain brands will, boast about a birch sidewall, which in my experience has been one of the best. That's a really dense hardwood, perfect for sidewalls, and perfect for bonding all those sidewall materials too. So we just got Mervin in too, so maybe we'll pull in a lib from out front there. Let's just look at some other, we talked about camber. let's look at some other camber shapes. Okay, I'm going to grab two popular profiles. So C2 from Mervin, GNU, and LibTech. And I'm also going to grab a black snowboard to death because this is a cambered snowboard with some unique relief tip and tail, so to speak. So we'll talk about both of these. We all know standard camber. Let's get into these two because these are good reasons why you should be upgrading to a new snowboard.
Throw that C2 on the ground and you'll see. So this is essentially like where things have gone. So you can really see underneath where Shane's hand is, there's a bunch of camber, and then it's actually rockered out in the dead middle. Camber again in front of the front foot,
Exactly.
and then the blends, of course, to the tip and tail. But you can essentially, like when that board's just unweighted, you can spin that thing. So what that does, it takes a ton of the load off of either end. It's on a bunch of different Mervin boards, but yet you still have that pop
and
from the camber under the foot.
We'll throw a proper camber down. I'm not spinning this like that because of the way the pressure now, and you can see it right there.
When you stand on it, push back down again. When you stand on it, watch the contact points move inward. So the board effectively almost shortens when you stand on it from what's engaging.
And these are the sort of leaps and bounds we've seen, especially in the last 10 years, across all brands, really. Let's get these back there. The frosting's a great example, obviously being C2, and smaller riders have been benefiting from C2. We love it in POW. Fawcett talked a ton about it on the Razman. Everything that we talked about on that Razman transfers right here. But these profiles, these shapes, this camber profile wasn't happening 15 years ago by any means. So we kind of already gone through that, but this is the one I personally like the most, and this is where I find really advanced riders benefit from this too, because now we can, as we keep talking about longer boards, I want to ride a longer board because I want more volume underfoot. This is giving us that option because with that Wapow, which I believe they're still calling it.
They still call it Wapow. With
that Wapow relief, this board, I can jump on a 6'1" black snowboard to death and turn this thing like it's an old school 55. Like every time I ride it, it blows my mind. It is so nimble and so quick. But when you do get into the POW situations, man, this thing gets up, no problem. But now I've got all that surface area under me too.
Big thing, it's a subtlety, but the camber, it looks like the camber ends here and the nose lifts off here. But it's not. It's actually way back right here. And it's a slight radius. And again, this is like the whole art of designing a snowboard and doing the core profiling, and the this would be in the mold, is just having it really slight blending in, and then they go, well, that's what they call a pow. Then it really lifts up. There. And actually the flat surface gets up onto a plane a little quicker too than it hitting a round surface.
Yeah, if you think of it impacting, it plows up right away. It's got all that inertia hitting that little zone right there, just pops you up.
Yeah, it's basically like hydrodynamic planing effect.
Top sheet materials have changed. Base materials are base materials. I mean, we are using the same stuff. A race base 10 years ago is pretty similar to today's.
Pretty similar. And
he's the expert on that stuff.
And also, the other thing, older boards, if we go back to this older board thing, they don't like, that plastic does not like age and UVs.
Yeah.
And
so it gets brittle. You'll see the sidewalls and older boards get brittle if we looked at any of those.
Almost no matter what you do, you can wax the hell out of that thing and store it in the dark and everything. It's got a shelf life, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So I'm living in this 12, 15 year thing. If your board's that old, yeah, it's time to upgrade. We're not just saying that because we're trying to sell snowboards. We're saying that because we want to have fun out there. You want gear that's responsive, working well, and
makes it easy for you.
Put the old board on the wall. It looks dope. It's part of your snowboard history. Quivers. Like, we all have quivers. Some of the quivers are going to live on the wall now. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is the waist size of the old school boards to something new. So we grabbed 256s. We've got a balance. I thought I had found the Burton catalog for that balance, but actually this is the incorrect one. But Fawcett,
it's 24-1.
Really?
Yep. 24-1 at the waist.
There it is. We are looking at
Waist with 50. Where's that? Is this a 57.5? No.
no, it's a 56. We're
Okay.
2 years off actually.
Well, yeah, it's somewhere at 24.4
yeah,
for a
that's
57.5, and this is the 56, so it's even narrower. This is, I mean, I measured it out. It's 24.2, which is
crazy.
modern, really small person. A lot of females would use.
That's like almost
that
like my
size.
old race board from the 90s. I think this thing's 24 that I used
Yeah.
to race on.
Yeah. So, and then a bunch of reasons for that. People weren't tipping the boards over super far. The narrower boards, it was an element to kind of help make the board easier to ride. That was just a band-aid to try and make the board perform a little easier, considering how engaging those ends were and how stiff the middles were. People weren't tipping it over super far. They could kind of get away with it, but it did take away the carving element from snowboarding completely.
Remember
with
seeing
soft
your
boots.
homie with like size 11 feet in the 90s who couldn't turn any way?
Either any which way with this much
'Cause
toe
they
and
were
heel
just
drag.
always smashing heels and skipping out, right? So everything has come so far in the sense of we're still dealing with straighter entry side cuts, but just having that wider waist. And when you carve like this guy, you need that.
You need it.
But it's stability for everybody, and it's another reason why I think upgrading, obviously not from a 2002, because that's a
Some
must.
people, that guy gave me the shot.
I know.
I see it every day I go out. I see someone on a board this old or similar, and I'm just like shaking my head and saying, "Oh my God, they'd have such a much better day on a modern board." Yeah. So these boards are wider, it's more stable in every which way, accommodate people with bigger feet. I will say it was a funny era, but a lot of riders with really small feet back then. So like Terrier, for instance, he rides like a 7.5, even though he's like 5'9". So pretty funny, but they've all kind of come around now and are riding wider boards.
Yeah. So we just wanted to jump on this week, quick shoot the shit about reasons to upgrade your gear, especially after that guy I had last week, which was hilarious. But that's awesome. He's now going to put that board on the wall, and we're looking at a couple new models for him here. So we're going to start dropping the show is coming back, obviously. Winter gear is showing up here. Therefore, we start to think about heading downstairs and doing proper reviews for you guys. So we'll get our top 6 in there of the bindings, the boards. And when these guys all headed out to the big demos that happen at Sun Peaks, we've got a good lounge episode of that review, and that'll be probably dropping next week. Morrison's back home. I believe he's editing now. So yeah, hopefully we'll get that one to you. And again, guys, thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week.